Hello everyone, we're back again with another writing video, and today we're looking at sentences, how to vary them, what to do with them, etc. So just before we start, obviously different teachers do teach things in different ways, as I've said before, so you need to take from this the things that really work with the way that you work and apply to your writing so that you can get the best from this kind of advice. So here's the writing mark scheme, and we're going to be looking today and kind of focusing on this idea of writing accurately. So as you can see, the marks are not as equally, or they're not equally weighted, but if you don't have this stuff right, then you can't hit a lot of the criteria in these sections. So it's important that we get this right to help us on our way to hitting this criteria. And as I showed you before, I talk about it through these 5 focuses or foci. So we've got sentence types, punctuation, tense, sentence openings, and vocabulary, and each one kind of contains a different focus that you need to consider when writing your pieces. So today we're going to have a look at sentence types, and we're going to have a look at what they are, so the different types, and we're going to also have a look at the effect that they have in writing, because that is where you really break into using these things at a kind of level of mastery. So actually taking these sentences and not just being able to identify that you've used all 3 sentence types, understanding their function within a piece of writing and being able to utilize that to back up your purpose. So how do we actually go about doing that? What are the sentences I'm talking about? Now I'm sure the next part's going to be revision for a lot of you, so I'm going to go through it really quickly. This is how I teach sentence types to pretty much all of my classes, so if I do teach you, I apologise for the recap, but revision is always important. The rest of you, this is a whirlwind tour on sentence types. So the first one we have is a simple sentence, and you can think about this one as a stick man. Now he has to make sense by himself, so this is an adult stick man. He is independent, and another word or another way to describe a simple sentence is an independent clause. He has a subject, and he has a main verb. So the subject is the thing that's doing something, and the main verb is what it's doing. And lots of phrases can have a subject and a main verb, but they don't make sense by themselves, and that's where this bit comes in. It has to make sense by itself. So make sense independently. And that's how you know that you have a simple sentence. A simple sentence is the simplest form of communication when it comes to sentences, and therefore it has the most impact in a well-crafted piece of writing. So in terms of the effect of a simple sentence, these are the messages your reader takes home. And when used in conjunction with other sentences, these sentences have some real power and can really hit home a message after you've built up the details using other sentences. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next one we've got is a compound sentence. Now, this again, we've got 2 stickmen, and there's a relationship between them in some way. Now, in order to establish that relationship, we need to choose what to put between them. You should, with a compound sentence, be able to put a full stop between them. So this one makes sense, and this one makes sense. They're both independent. So they're both adults, they can both pay their own bills, they can both do their own thing, and they make sense by themselves. The other thing we can do is we can include a semicolon in certain situations. Now, if you're struggling to vary your punctuation, a great way to get a semicolon into a piece of writing is to use it between these 2 phrases, or these simple sentences, to create this compound sentence. They have to be quite closely related in order to make that work, but if you can make it work, then it works really well for you. And then you've got that semicolon in there as well. The final one is a comma, but not by itself. And this is really important. If you have a comma by itself, this is called comma splicing. The comma is not strong enough to hold these 2 together. Think of the comma as a kind of walking stick to help out little phrases or things that you may use that don't make sense by themselves. It gives them a crutch, helps them out with attaching to independent clauses and things that make sense. In this case, both of these people are independent. Therefore, they do not need the comma as a helping hand. What they need is the comma with a fanboys. Otherwise known as coordinating conjunctions, fanboys are then used to establish the relationship between these two. And that is really the function of a compound sentence. If you have two phrases that have some kind of link, or two independent clauses that have a kind of link, and you can establish that link clearly through your communication, then you can create a really well-crafted sentence that is developed and detailed and shows something like cause and effect, or shows that despite something happening, something else didn't happen. And by using these, and using a variety of these, you can establish different relationships between different clauses. And really, these have a lot of power within your developed sentences. We'll now look at the last one. This is our complex sentence. So we have our independent clause from earlier, also known as a simple sentence. But then we've got this guy. This is our dependent or subordinate clause. Now, if you think about it, you're probably subordinate to your parents, or at the moment you are dependent on parents or guardians to get in food, to pay the bills, to pay the mortgage. So you are dependent on them in the same way as this clause here is dependent on this clause. Now, the great thing about a complex sentence is the variety that you can get. So yes, at the moment I have my independent clause followed by my dependent clause. So let's create a little sentence on the side so we can understand how this works a little bit better. So this is my independent clause, or my simple sentence here. That's this guy. I'm now going to create this dependent or subordinate clause. This does not make sense by itself. So I'm going to have falling softly and gently. That's my subordinate clause. It adds more detail, but if you said falling softly and gently to someone, it would make absolutely no sense. So in this scenario here, with this person and this person, we can say the snow landed on the ground, comma, because the comma is needed to attach this because it doesn't make sense by itself. The snow landed on the ground, comma, falling softly and gently. Now, if we were going to be really clever, we can move this guy around. So let's say I wanted to put him at the front by here. I can do that. And if you then translate that to the sentence, so again, we have this bit here, but we move it up here. Falling softly and gently, the snow landed on the ground. And again, you would put the comma in there. So you'd have this bit plus this bit. The falling softly and gently, the snow landed on the ground. The last way that you can use this is imagine that he's sitting on his dad's shoulders. So he's holding on and he's sat on his dad's shoulders. And that's where we get our parenthetical commas out. Okay, a bit like the dad will have to hold on to keep the son in place. We have to hold and keep this phrase in place within the sentence using these parenthetical commas. So the snow, comma, then back to this, falling softly and gently, comma, landed on the ground, full stop. So immediately, just by understanding about how these independent and dependent clauses work, we've created a whole variety of structures that we can use in order to deliver this information. And these sentences are fantastic for building up ideas, adding evidence and adding gravitas, adding some real weight to your arguments or to your persuasions or to your explanations. And this is where you show the examiner or your reader how well informed you are on the topic. If you combine these with then some short sentences and some simple sentences that hit home the message that you're trying to get across, you're both communicating clearly and building up your argument effectively. So, the most important thing to remember about all of this is diversity. You need to make sure that you are not just using simple sentences, not just using complex sentences, which is something I've seen quite a bit, because I think people think that if you can use the more complex sentence types, that gets you higher marks. That's not how it works. The most important thing that you need to do is to show that you can adapt your writing to suit purpose and to have an effect on the reader. So what you need to do is understand that each of these sentences has a job. The simple sentence can hit home a message to your audience, and it's what your audience takes away from your piece of writing. A compound sentence builds up detail and establishes relationships between things within the sentence. A complex sentence builds up that detail and adds some real variety in terms of rhythm. So you can think about how to use that dependent and independent clause to best put across your ideas. If you leave the independent clause until the end, you're leaving a little bit of suspense, building up those ideas. Whereas if you add it at the beginning, then you're embellishing the idea you've already come up with. So hopefully that's covered a little bit on the sentence types for you, and gives you a little bit of an idea about how you can use them for effect. But most importantly, the message that you need to take away there is that you need to use all three types, and that diversity is really important. I have linked underneath this video a bite-size exercise sheet. There's a few exercises and then some quizzes, and just some more information about these sentence types in case you wanted a little bit of extra practice. The next video will be up soon and should be on punctuation and how important that also is in your writing. But that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video.